Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sacred Symbols Plus, your weekly extra dose of sacred symbols. We have a special episode for you today because this is our long-awaited Elden Ring Spoilercast. I'm so excited to finally be doing this. It's crazy. It's already here, actually, in some ways. I've got a fantastic lineup here. Of course, our very own MrMattyPlays. What's up?
Hello. How's it going?
Doing well. Thank you for being here, Maddie. And special guest, someone who I haven't talked to in quite a while since back in the ham radio days, but we're so happy to have him here. FightinCowboy, welcome. Your first appearance on Sacred Symbols, right?
Yes. Yeah. I've done the ham, I've done a defining Duke, and now we're over here. So
excellent.
I'm
making the rounds.
Climbing across the podcast hierarchy. Just
right.
Getting in a little bit everywhere.
Yeah. So before, when we talked about, we always knew we were going to do this spoiler cast, but one of the common things that I got tweets that were like, please get Cowboy on this show.
Of course. Yeah.
And what's funny is we were already had lightly discussed that, the possibility of that. So I was so happy that you were down and able to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so excited to talk about this game fully, just because I think we can all agree this is just a generational game, no doubt.
Yeah.
So before we get into it, because I don't want to waste any time. Before we get into it, the beginning part of the show will be spoiler free, and I probably maybe read that in the Patreon post or whatever. We're going to just do a few minutes of spoiler free talk. So if you are curious about Elden Ring and you want to hear our thoughts on it overall, maybe just get a feeling on whether or not this game is going to be for you. Perfect. And then we will make it very clear when spoilers start, and then we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the game. So let's just kick this off right out the gate. Joshua Tull writes into us and says, "Greetings, fellow Tarnished. I believe that Elden Ring is the most accessible From game to date. I think that it could be the Trojan horse delivering new fans to the series. I wonder what your gents' opinion is on this. There are so many ways to combat the challenges presented to you and the ability to go and try something else if your progression is stymied. I'm not saying if you didn't like From games before, this could be the one for you. Merely that if you struggled before, this could be a good entry point. Thanks for the spoiler cast, and remember to always try finger butthole." So that's, I think, a great way to start this off, and we can kind of expand it slightly from there. Is that a lot of people, I think rightfully so, have a lot of preconceived notions about FromSoftware games. And the meteoric rise of this game, from the reviews or just everyone checking it out. I think a lot of people that had written this game off have now are deciding maybe time to give it a second look. And so, Cowboy, I wanted to throw this to you first, just because you have a channel designed, maybe not designed, but highly focused on helping people with these games. Do you find that Elden Ring might be the gateway for people into the FromSoftware universe?
I agree that it's definitely the most accessible. Between the fact that if you hit something and you're stuck, you just go somewhere else, try something else, and that's something that you couldn't really do in a lot of FromSoft games. I mean, even looking at like Dark Souls, 1, 2, and 3, there were different paths, but it was very clear, like, oh, this is the starter area. If you're struggling here, you're not going to want to go to where all the skeletons are, because they're just going to beat you into a pulp. And there's a lot more flexibility in that here, especially the introduction of the summoning bell and the ashes. That's, it takes a ton of stress, especially off of players that are new, because you basically have something else that's, the boss can focus its attention on. So from an accessibility standpoint, I think it is, but I don't know if I'd say it's going to be an entry point into the series, just because thinking about, the core gameplay loop of Elden Ring is still there. But I think one thing is, obviously we have the summoning bell, which I think makes things a lot more accessible to players that are new. And going to one of the older Souls games where you don't have that, that's an immediate jump in difficulty for sure. And the other, Elden Ring, just with the sheer length of the game and how much content there is, once you get rolling, like levels come in a lot. Like early on, it feels a little weak because certain enemies at the beginning you're getting 50 souls, 100, or excuse me, runes, 50 runes, 100 runes.
You can call them souls. I'm sure that'll happen
right.
more than a few times in this show.
But like, I mean, towards the end of the game, like I hit 150 and still had like 2 or 3 bosses left, and I decided to stop leveling there. Whereas in your typical Souls game, you're usually like 85 to 90-ish by the time you're finishing it, maybe a bit over 100 if you're tackling all the DLCs. And so not only do we have the accessibility of the ashes and that, going wherever you want in the world to try and level up and try different things. And, with that, there's like, new cheese tactics and whatnot. But just the general amount of experience you're getting is a lot higher. So, I mean, just in terms of doing builds, like I haven't found anything that feels like, oh yeah, you don't want to do that play style, that's weak. Like magic feels great, faith feels great, strength, dex, quality, every build archetype feels good. I mean, the only thing that I've heard from people that is kind of lacking is like doing bow only, which and that's more you're relying on constantly crafting your arrows, which is just kind of tedious to begin with. But even then, the damage is still there. It's just needing thousands of arrows for a playthrough. That's well, I mean, it comes with the territory, I guess. But yeah, basically, I mean, every play style here is definitely viable, which in the previous games it's like, well, you could go pyromancy, but it's kind of iffy. It's not going to be all that good. And here it's like, pretty much use whatever you want.
Right.
So
Matty, is there anything you want to add on top of that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of the accessibility comes from, not that the other games weren't good, but I think a lot of it comes from people willing to be patient, because I think all of the core tenets are still there. Like, you have to be patient. I think you still got to be like decent at games, even with some of the easier avenues you can take. You can go and level up somewhere else. You can do the summons, but you still have to be solid at games. And more than anything, like, I think the way that the game doesn't instruct you, which I love about it, will kind of still make it hard to get into, because I've seen people who have never played these games, and Cowboy, you saw my build, and I consider myself as knowing what I'm doing, and my build was terrible initially.
It was rough, yeah.
Yeah, it was rough. Like, and I consider myself pretty good at RPGs. I remember saying to him, I was like, I need to respec. This thing's terrible right now. And he had to come in, Cowboy, help me. So I was thinking, like, hey, if I have a decent idea of what I'm doing, and I had a horrible build, and that can really determine a lot of the difficulty spikes. I was having trouble with I don't want to say who, but a certain boss that I don't think is actually typically difficult. She might be a bit tough, but I think
I killed her in like 3 minutes in the walkthrough video.
Yeah, there you go. So there you go. Right.
I just
yeah, right, exactly. I don't think it was supposed to be super difficult. It seemed like a very showy boss. Dustin, I'll announce who it is once we get to the spoiler section. But my point being is, I think that if you don't know much about RPGs or what you're doing, you're still going to have a lot of trouble. I think the idea here, though, is that because it's open world, because there are other ways to escape frustration and just feel like you're doing something, people are willing to be more patient. But otherwise, like, I guess in essence, yes, it is more accessible. But I don't want to craft this idea that you can just hop in and it's easier, because I had a lot of trouble with this game. I'll be honest. I got stomped here.
The core tenets are still there, and I think that's what, especially with Souls games in general, that's what a lot of people struggle with. Is that the combat is all about patience and commitment. Because if you're using that giant colossal weapon and you decide to swing it, and then the boss has a faster weapon and they decide to swing it, like, too bad. You already said you're going to swing your sword. You can't suddenly dodge out. Whereas in almost any other RPG, you could be mid combo, and assuming you're not like floating in the air, you can just tap the dodge button and that's going to take priority. And I think that's where a lot of players struggle, is so many games they give you that priority, whereas Souls, it forces you to, if you decided to do an action, if you wanted to do that crazy super weapon art that takes 10 seconds to get off, well, you're standing there for 10 seconds, and if you get blasted in the face, you should have waited. So it's making that adjustment that I think so many people struggle with, because the core difficulty, I mean, we've joked about it before on stream, but like, I mean, God, once Dark Souls really gets down to it, you could effectively just like walk, roll, and duck and dodge every attack in the game. But a lot of people don't have the patience to just pay attention to that, because that's not how, no other games really do that. And that's what I think has made the Soulsborne genre grow to what it is now. Is it's different. It's a completely different feel from any other RPG out there.
Right. The way that I kind of view it, as far as like accessibility or whatever, is that I feel like this game is still a mountain to climb. It's just a little more gradual in some ways. And I think that comes into like, you know, going and leveling up. The first time I fought the first main boss, I got completely destroyed. And it's because I already did a lot of the content in the early area in the network test. So I thought, oh, I'm just going to kind of do some of the stuff, but then blaze through it. And I was like,
I know what I'm doing. I'm
yeah, and I was like, not so
this
much.
ain't my first rodeo.
Right, yeah. And then I went and I leveled, and then I think I beat him in like 2 or 3 tries after that. And I think that can be the case for a lot of people. But it's still very much a FromSoftware Souls game. You still need to learn the tenets of what the game expects from you. And so that's something to keep in mind. This game isn't going to magically make Souls click with you necessarily. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, because this has been a major part of the conversation, is the technical aspects. And this question came in from the champ, and he said, is this game really a 97 with technical issues? So many times I've been fighting a dragon, and the dragon just disappears and goes back to the spawn area. The frame rate is all over the place, and the game isn't that pretty. I don't agree with that one. Now, for me personally, if I were to put a score on it, it is about a 97. At the same time, I'm not criticizing other games like Pokemon for running like crap. I find it amazing that some reviewers are so quick to criticize games on the Switch and blame the weak hardware. But when it comes to Elden Ring, which is performing just as bad as Pokemon on better hardware, that's also a stretch. So Elden Ring gets a pass. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt the commenter as they write in, but
they have no chance
I love
to
Elden
respond.
Ring. Yeah. I love Elden Ring, but the reviews are showing their bias. Just read some of their other reviews. They wouldn't dare criticize Elden Ring for the things they criticize other games for. So
no, and that's accurate. That is accurate.
Yeah,
I think people I mean, I only gave it a 9 out of 10. I was very clear in my review. Like this is a beautiful game. It has the potential to be FromSoftware's best game to date, but you know, my God, these performance issues are absolutely atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I feel it's a little bit better. Like my PS5 experience has been gravy smooth compared to PC, which is like, really? Like, you know, I have a 3080 and a 3950X. Like I shouldn't be having these issues. So I do think part of it's bias. I think part of it is FromSoft has in the gaming industry has become like this darling figure almost. And I do think to an extent, some people are afraid to criticize it. You know, you give Elden Ring an 8 out of 10, all of a sudden, fucking haters, garbage reviewers probably didn't get it. You know, they didn't get the game early enough and gave it a bad score. And there's a lot of that just vitriol out there. And you know, it's not to say that you know, reviewers have no credibility if they don't point out faults, but I think a lot of people were they probably, you know, coming from the Souls community and knowing the you know, loud minority in that community were probably like, oh, the game has issues, but you know, I don't want to deal with these people. I'm sure a couple of people thought about that during the review. They're like, I don't want to deal with the loud assholes in this community if I say, you know, it's not perfect. Because I mean, if they fix the technical issues, I think this could easily be a generational game. This could be the next Witcher 3 of RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, the technical issues are fucking huge. Like even now with the recent patches, I'll still stream it and my character will be like,
yeah, the freeze up. Yeah,
dude, the freeze up is so bad. And so
happens all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's more people should have talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever their reasons for not talking about it, that's, you know, I don't know what that is, but more people should have brought up the technical issues because they're you know, they're out there. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. I think that when it comes to reviews, I'm guessing that if you were to take the Metacritic scores, I'm guessing most reviewers played it on PS5 over PC. So I think that's
possible
part of it. But also that in addition, I just don't know if a lot of reviewers, and this is a problem, I'm not excusing it, but I think that some of them don't even necessarily think about that. About some of the tech, like when you think of it, like I feel like it would be perfectly fair for a reviewer to be like, this game, let's say PS5, has inconsistent frame rates, and isn't so hot in that department. But overall, my experience was whatever. Here's why this is still the score I'm giving it to it. Like if you explain it, that's fine. But overall, it's funny just because I played the PS4 app on PS5, and so my total experience was like butter, like very
Really?
few frame
Wow.
drops. I had more bugs playing other games. I should say that. I don't want to open up the comparison. I had way more bugs in some of the other games I played recently. So, and that's something I think people need to understand also is that bugs and performance issues are two different things. And I don't think Elden Ring is a buggy game. And I think that I don't know. I feel like I didn't have like that much of like I never got stuck in the world.
Are you in the PvP scene though at all?
No, that's probably the problem. I didn't do any
right now.
PvP.
The PvP scene is like what was this? Is this podcast like profanity safe?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a fucking disaster right now. There are glitches that allow you to instant kill players. There are glitches that are allowing players to machine gun fire off 1,000 damage shield lasers.
Holy shit!
There are glitches that allow you to instant bleed. It's a disaster right now. Like I've been sending tons and tons and tons of stuff to the guy I know at Bamco, and he's passing it all over to FromSoft, and I'm like, yo, like where is a patch? Because it's getting to the point where like 1 in every 5 fights is somebody abusing a glitch.
Damn.
Yeah.
So
I also
I'm glad
noticed
you brought that up.
Like boss fights in general. I don't know if you guys had this. Like some of the larger scale bosses, I should emphasize.
Boss AI breaking.
Yes, like there's one in particular that's a very big giant that was like rolling up on rocks almost out of the arena and was just killing me because I was like, well, I can't fight him, so I just need to die here. That happened a little too often for me as well. Where
I had the tree spirit things. They're just like big.
Yes. Yeah.
Those things. Yeah. I had almost every single one of them. I would just hit it with a big attack and it would be like, and then it would just sit. It would stop moving. I'd have it like half
really?
health. And almost every single one of them in the Let's Play bugged out and it would just sit. And I'm like, cool, easy kill. Thanks, bro.
Free runes.
Yeah. Free
Interesting. Well, okay. So then, I mean, that's good. I'm glad to hear other experiences. And I'm wondering, it's just so weird because I feel like, I don't know. My experience was relatively bug free. Like I never had a boss decide to stop moving, but it's definitely possible.
I think it's From Software. Like I mean, even going back to Demon Souls, they are intimately familiar with PlayStation hardware and what they're doing on PlayStation. And I mean, there's going to be more issues with PC because there's thousands of different software configurations. So. I mean, right now, and like you said, that the whole trick of if you play the PS4 version on the PS5, because the only difference is like there's less scratch texture. So instead you get a smooth 60 FPS playing PS4 version on PS5, whereas PS5 version on PS5 is like 45 to 60.
Right.
So, I mean, that's definitely like, that's what I've been telling people. Like, where should I buy this? I'm like, get it on console right now because PC is basically a disaster. And I think that's part of it. I don't think. I mean, even today, there's still some glitchy stuff on like Dark Souls 3 and Dark Souls 2 on PC. And I think FromSoft just isn't as. I don't want to say they're not competent at that platform, but you can tell they don't do as much bug testing there as they did on the mainline console platforms for sure.
Right. So I think our overall sentiment, as far as if you're listening to the Spoilercast because you're curious about Elden Ring, is that. What awaits you might be one of the greatest experiences ever, but, and that's a very big but, you should understand some of the technical aspects that are worth considering, especially where you play, and also the fact that this is still very much a FromSoft game. So if you don't like that, it's possible. I've seen people that are like, I have never liked FromSoftware, but something about Elden Ring has changed me. So there's a risk in there, if you're tight on cash, maybe you should wait a little bit. But if you want to, take the dive, go for it.
I think the dive's worth it. It's a lot of fun. I mean, like I said, I have 250 hours at the moment, and I'm just waiting to slow down. And I plan on starting up an Xbox playthrough and trying out like a dual wield build just for shits and giggles.
Nice.
But I mean, yeah, they've definitely made it more approachable and just the freedom. I mean, there's so many weapons, and then the fact that they brought back power stancing from Dark Souls 2, which people loved. Like, it's really fun this time around. It's definitely the most fun PvE wise, like hands down. This, look, Demon, Dark 2, Dark 3, this blows them all out of the water for sure.
Definitely.
Right.
Any other Maddie, I guess for you, any other opening Final thought. Opening final thoughts.
No,
Makes
because
sense.
I'm having clearly a tough time talking about this game without spoiling it. So the quicker
Okay.
we get there, I guess the better for me at least.
All right. Well, before we go into the spoiler section, anybody that's going to try this game, this is your non-spoiler hot tip. Level your freaking vigor. Level your vigor.
Yes. Go
So many
around to those
people-
churches.
So many people. No, not. I'm talking stats.
Stats.
Because everyone plays.
Oh,
and they're
right.
like,
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I want this cool sword. I only need 32 strength, but it's huge. I really want it. And then they get up to the boss, and they're like, this thing's like Matty. Like, this boss is just killing me, bro. And I'm like, what's your vigor at? And he's like, 23. I'm like, what are you doing? Level your vigor. Health is the most important stat in Dark Souls. Level your vigor.
100%. Yes.
Okay, spoiler mode is off. Tune out or tune in.
Wouldn't spoiler mode be on because we're going into spoilers?
Yeah, probably. Spoiler mode is now on. So anything goes at this point. And so I have a bunch of questions from the audience that can kind of lead us in one direction and another. I have them organized, talked about open world and bosses and stuff like that. I think it's most appropriate to start with the open world because I think that that's been kind of the main thing that people have been focused on when it comes to, you know, the things you read on Twitter or the thing that is so, I guess, impressive that FromSoftware pulled off. And so I'll start with Brett the Illustrator, who says, "What's up, ring-wielding elders? I want to see what you think about the return of exploration full force in Elden Ring. I'm personally in love with it. As an example, I'm looking at every direction I go in game for secrets. If there's a rooftop, I jump. If there's a hole, I jump. If there's a stream, I follow. If there's a cave, spelunk. Modern games are missing these elements and spark memories of looking for Easter eggs in old Halos and exploring in Ocarina of Time or even roaming Skyrim's mountains, etc." And I think that has been so captivating for so many people. This game is that it's the stories that are there that aren't written. They're the ones that are gameplay focused. Whether you're on your horse and you see this creature in a distance, or you see this building and then you go check it out and it's like, oh shit, there was a boss there and then he killed me. And then it's like the stories, the water cooler conversations, right? And in a lot of ways, what I said on Sacred Symbols, and I know this annoys so many people, but I think it's completely fair to compare this game in certain aspects to Breath of the Wild in its in the way that it's game. The world invites you to go out and find it. It's not a list of side quests. It's not a list of activities. It's just like, go do this, and the game is going to pique your interest here and there all the time. So overall, I guess I guess we'll throw this to you, Matty. The open world, how did you feel? You know, FromSoftware, this is their first time really doing that. How did it strike you overall from when you were reviewing it?
I personally loved it because the way I described it in my review was the game did something that I don't think a lot of games outside of maybe Ghost of Tsushima did, which is it tells you to use your eyes. Like, we're so accustomed to following markers and points on the map and just reading quest objectives that it was really nice just to kind of like the write-in described, like see a river and go, I wonder where this goes, and it leads to a cave. It's just a really well thought out world where, you know, the Dark Souls series and Demon Souls to I'd say a lesser extent, and Bloodborne, Sekiro, like they were all built like where there were these puzzle pieces that were fit together. And so every stretch of the way you'd find little secrets in every corner. It's like they took that puzzle Lego like design and just made a whole open world around that. And it worked tremendously well because for every extra bit of effort I put in, the game gave back. And so just looking around was always worthwhile. And again, because I wasn't tabbing out, checking a map, setting objective markers, all that stuff, which you can set pings on the map, I think that's fine. But otherwise, like, I'm very much just in the world. And that's something that not enough games do. Like, I at times it didn't even feel like a video game just because you were just constantly in the game world and not interfacing with menus. So I loved it. You know, you described it as Breath of the Wild. For me, my correlation was really Skyrim, because with Skyrim, part of it was on like a social phenomenon level, you know, that zeitgeist of like just people who don't typically know about this game. But on a gameplay level, it was that, again, that feeling that we got like a once in a generation moment where every corner was a new area tucked in. In the case of Skyrim, it was like there was a story to this dungeon, and they led the industry in dungeon design where it would kind of always go full circle. Like you'd always end up back at the entrance. And you're seeing a lot of, I think, industry leading design in Elden Ring, much like you did with Skyrim, where, of course, and this will lead to a lot of bad imitations, we're going to see a lot of companies try to follow suit, see what they can do. And it's weird because, a lot of these companies are hiring these kids out of school who are AAA designers. They're taught to make these games accessible. And the reason Elden Ring was so phenomenal was it shakes the norm of what everyone's taught about AAA design. So I think, unfortunately, we're going to get a lot of like bad faith imitations that don't understand how to properly guide the player, that really only FromSoft can do after doing this for what, a generation really, or two, where they've just mastered designing a world that you don't really need to be told what to do and you can figure it out. And that's not easy. So all in all, like I love the open world. It's a pinnacle of open world design in my eyes, and there hasn't been any better. There really hasn't. It's refreshing compared to what we've got, but it's also just so new and unique that I think it's going to pave the way for many years to come. So, Cowboy, you've been doing, you do a lot of tutorial videos, and I was wondering, like, man, that must be a difficult task with the amount of content. Just like overall, it's like, okay, well, this this dungeon or this cave has this boss. Is this worth doing a video about? Because there's literally like a shit ton of these caves with bosses. Like, so overall, like how are you finding, or how did you find the open world? And as a longtime FromSoft fan that has dug into these games deep, how did you feel about it?
So I mean, I definitely enjoy it. You can see a lot of elements from the previous game in the design, like areas that are tucked away, and I think the biggest thing has been the addition of a jump, the addition of that verticality, which I think we have Sekiro to thank for that. Like even in your legacy dungeons, things like Stormvale, things like the Royal Academy, there's a lot of times where you're just like, you see a roof or you see a ledge and you're like, where does that go? And you wander it around and you're like, I see a platform down there. I think I can get there. And then you jump on down to that. And there are, I mean, God, it's just looking back to like my first playthrough, there are so many things that I didn't even think to do, because all of these games up until now, the jump has been this very awkward like sprint, and you can kind of jump to reach a ledge, and now they really want you to like, hey, jump places and you're going to find stuff. And so it's getting into that kind of breaking that previous habit and adapting. In terms of general open world design, I think I'd agree with Maddie with the general way it's laid out and whatnot. Like I like that once you find your map marker, even the map doesn't detail stuff until you discover it, which I think is good. But I like that, like looking at your map, you can see visual things like, it looks like, there's a little red hole. I wonder what that is. And you go over there and it's a cave you can go in. Mm-hmm. The one thing I would have liked, I think, I would have liked a little bit more guidance on NPC side quests. And I'm not saying we need, we don't need a checklist. And I know in the review I said, hey, maybe give us an in-game journal that has brief dialogue. Like I spoke to Hayeta, she said she was heading east. That's it. Just give me something, because in your typical FromSoft game, everything is, hell, you could keep your hand on the left wall and just walk around the whole game and you won't miss anything. But with the open world nature, like there are some NPC quest lines where they will jump, like, since we're in spoilers, with Millicent's quest line, you talk to Millicent after you go through her initial quest. You have to talk to her up in the capital region after you talk to her there a little bit. You have to talk to her up in the snowy region after you talk to her there a little bit. You have to talk to her in a hidden region, and she's just like hopping between all these biomes. And when you do the discussion, she's like, "Thank you for your help. Perhaps we shall meet again." And it's where? Like, that'd be cool. But like, there's literally some quests. Like, I mean, the Celovus in the tower, he's like, go give this potion to Nefeli. And you're like, who's Nefeli? And he's like, shut the fuck up. I'm trying to help you, dude. Like, I don't even know who you're talking about. Where is she? Maybe out east? Could she maybe be in a hub type place? And like, yeah, I mean, on multiple playthroughs, you learn these NPCs and you know where to go. But like, man, pre-review, I was stuck on the Grape Lady quest forever because you have this blind maiden, and it's like she starts here on the map, and then she goes here on the map, and then she goes like here on the map, and then the next time she was way over here, and it's like a blind lady. And this is a swamp filled with giant crawfish. And so I'm thinking, and I'm like, all right, well, you know, she's just kind of been going north, staying along the river's edge. This makes sense. And now all of a sudden, the place she's at, either she jumped in one of those airlifts and it yeeted her all the way up to it, or she had to like wander by an encampment full of knights and ballistas. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, all right, this don't make sense. How the hell did she get up here when I eventually found her? And it's little things like that. Like, I mean, even just talking to her, if she had been like, oh, thank you for the eye. I can see the light now. I'll continue my journey north. Great. I'm going to hunt everywhere north until I find her ass. I think that would have helped a lot with the side quests.
Yeah, I remember the one that where it was like, what's going on here was, I forget his name, but it's the initial guy who you can study faith and incantations from.
Yeah,
and he spends the whole game mostly talking about how he's eventually going to go out and learn more. He's going to visit I don't know if it was a school or visit a church or something like that. And I remember I was just exploring near, I want to say Lindell, like on the outskirts. And he's just on kid you not, like not near Grace Point, just out on a random road. And I'm like, is that him? And, I get off my horse. I'm like, holy fuck, it is him. And I talk to him. He's like, you found me. I'm like, yeah, I guess. Like, yeah, I guess you're out here. And he's like, he like says in sweet nothings like where he's gonna go next. I'm like, I don't even know. I agree entirely. Like I don't want just quest objectives, but just like a journal saying like I spoke to so and so, and they said they're heading northeast. It's like okay,
yeah,
kind of like Cowboy said, like
even just a direction. Like I'll keep my own paper journal. I'll write Brother Corn East ? Like just anything because some of the quest lines, like I mean. And I guess some people say this is the charm of the FromSoft games, but like without the community and a wiki, you would never figure it out. Like you want to know how that quest line ends?
Yeah.
After you find him there, you find him over at Gold Mask, just the random dude that's sitting like this on a bridge with a sun face. You advance the game a little bit more. They end up at the Capitol by the Coliseum in the Royal Capital, little Coliseum area that you can't actually fight in.
Yeah.
You talk to him there. There's a statue you have to take an elevator down to get to the statue. You have to go up to that. You have to have like 37 faith or 32 or something.
37. That's such a great
you need to cast Law of Regression at the statue. The statue then reveals itself. Then you go back and talk to them and they're like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And some dialogue happens. Then you advance it a little bit more. They move location up north. You advance the story a little bit more. They go back to the Coliseum. And then you can finally find the dude dead with his bell bearing. And you get a thing that leads you to a secret ending. But it's like, who the fuck is going to figure this out? Like without a guide or a wiki or something.
Yeah.
Like, there's the side quests are so obscure. And I get it. That's FromSoft. But like, man, on my first playthrough, I was so frustrated with some of these side quests. I was like, I don't know where the hell you're at. Like even now, most people haven't figured out, or not most people, the community still hasn't figured out the Kenneth Height side quest. So there's the guy, the Kenneth Height, you talk to him. And he says, oh, take back my castle. And then you beat up the dudes, take back the castle. You fast forward a little bit and you go there and it's been overrun by demi-humans. And he's like, oh, it's gone to shit. I need to find a true ruler. Well, apparently Nefeli is the true ruler. And we know this because the details have been data mined. But nobody knows how to get there. So like you do the Nefeli's chain where she helps you fight Godric. She'll give you a talisman. She'll go to the Albanuric village, realizes her dad was the one who sent people to murder all the Albanurics. She gets all sad. You talk to her, you say, cheer up. You give her a key item hawk that you find at the start of the game after teleporting there via the 4 belfries. And she goes, this reminds me of my first ash, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. That's all people know right now is you get her the Stormhawk and somehow she ties into Kenneth Height. And there's theories that maybe the dude that's like stomping on Godric's head, the guy that opens the gate for you or whatever, is somehow tied in. And these are just from pieces of dialogue that people have found from like data mining game files, but nobody knows how to get there. And it's like, you got the entire community, like 2 weeks after launch, still hasn't figured out this fucking side quest. And at the end, you're probably going to get like a helmet or something, you know? It's like, man, is this? And we don't even know. Is the side quest completed in game? Is there just cut content that was just left in the files? Because that is stuff that happens.
Yeah.
You just don't know. And that's FromSoft quest design.
Mm-hmm.
I did something really dumb in my playthrough, and so I'm really looking forward to my second playthrough to fix this. And this isn't a problem with the game. This is a problem with me.
What did you do?
So I got to the Volcano Manor, and I kind of was getting to it late. Like, I was over leveled for this area. I don't know. I just ended up like going and doing other stuff, and so I was like, okay, I talked to them. I'll join your crew. I'll go murder someone. But first, I would like to get the Great Rune here. And so I went and did that, not thinking. And then I went back. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to do some of this PvP stuff. And they're like, yeah, you kind of killed our leader. So we're out. Like, we're kind of done here. And I was like, I just kind of screwed myself out of doing this entire quest log. Maybe I shouldn't have killed their god in charge, which is just obvious. Yeah. Then that's the thing. And I think that's kind of always been the case with a lot of From Software games. It's like, I don't know. I'm somewhere in the middle that the vagueness of the quests can be kind of a benefit because they lead to that feeling of when you do organically see that guy on the side of the road, it's kind of like, oh, dude, I found him. That's cool. Like there wasn't like a marker that was like, go here and find this man, right? But at the same time, when they get too vague, like what Cowboy was talking about, it just leads to frustration.
That's not even the worst. Let's take a moment to talk about the Ronnie quest line. Okay.
Yes.
Now,
I got that ending, and I don't know how I got that ending.
This is tied to one of the trophy endings. And the crazy thing is, there's like a bajillion early steps to this quest that aren't necessarily required, but tie into it lore wise. But so the general breakdown is, at one point in the game, you have to talk to Ronnie, and you need to pledge service to her. If you had already been talking to like Fia and Rogier back at Round Table Hold, when you first meet Ronnie, she'll tell you to fuck off. She's like, you're looking for the death mark, be gone, thought. And then so you have to go all the way back to Rogier, and he's like, oh, well, tell her we're sorry or something. And then you go back, and then she'll let you pledge service. So tons of players already thought they were soft locked because they didn't even realize that interaction. After you talk to her, you need to go down into Nokron. For Nokron to open, you first need to beat General Radahn. Then a meteor falls from the sky. You don't know where it fell from the sky. If you go to the Mistwood area, you'll find a big hole. You go down into the hole. Blade is supposed to meet you down there. But Blade has been imprisoned in the Everjail with the guy that he may have helped you fight at the start of the game. So if you don't free him, he'll never be down in Nokron, and you have to explore it by yourself. But after you explore Nokron and you get all the way to the end, you're going to find this dagger thing. You bring that back to Ronnie, and she's like, thank you, blah, blah, blah. Things are good. At this point, I thought the quest was done. I was like, great, finished it, brought her thing. No. There's a third tower that was previously sealed in Ronnie's area. You now go to that tower, and that's going to teleport you into another lower area. When you go down into that area, there's a doll, a little Ronnie figurine on the ground. You pick that up, you sit at a grace, and you keep trying to talk to it. After 3 or 4 times, she's like, you must like piddling dolls, blah, 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 blah. Go kill the baleful lord, or this invader thing. Then you have to find the baleful invader. After you find the baleful invader, she'll then be like, thank you, blah, blah, blah. Now I can now rest. She then gives you a ring. You then need to go to where Renala was and open up a chest. Or she gives you a key. You have to go to where Renala is, open up the chest with the key to get the special ring. And then you need to go through the Lake of Rot, which was after the baleful invader, climb inside a sarcophagus. That sarcophagus is going to take you to a boss. After you beat that boss,
that sarcophagus was like talked away.
After beating him, there's a seal on a wall that won't be there if you happen to have the ring. You go through that seal, it takes you up to that area in Southwest Liurnia that no one could figure out how to get through. You run through that area, you fight the dragon that disappeared earlier, you go down into the cathedral, you find the Ronnie doll, you put the finger on her ring, and then the quest is finally done.
It's ridiculous. It's like, it reminds me of the Placid Dusax, I think it's called, that dragon boss fight, that where you
dope.
Yeah, amazing boss fight, but you literally, it's incredible how they introduce this content, because they don't. It's in the back end of a grace point. You drop off, you go to this big area and you lay down in this one spot specifically, and I'm like, why? Like, it's one of the coolest bosses in the game, and they just hide it. It's the same thing with Millennia. Millennia is probably my favorite boss fight in that game. It's just like, dude, it's behind Holly Tree, which is one of the most difficult areas in the game, in some corner that's hard to find, and then you finally get all the way through, and it's the hardest boss in the game just waiting for you. It's incredible. It's why I appreciate it, but it's so baffling to me as a player.
Yeah, the Ronnie quest line. What was funny is that I was doing that relatively like guide free, and then when I got to the section with the doll, I was like, okay, I'm gonna look at what I'm supposed to do. And I was like, oh, I just have to do the same thing over and over. And so I like peeked ahead. I was like, yeah, there's no way. I'm just gonna use this guide because I would have never figured this shit out, like, ever. But it's so funny because I'm so mixed about that quest line, because I actually think that what happens is really cool. Yeah. It's like a really interesting quest line, but it's so frustrating at the same time that it's like, did it have to be this cryptic? Like, did it have to be exactly like this?
Millicent's is up there too. Millicent's is another super obscure quest because you need to like find a prosthesis and give her the prosthesis and then talk to her at a bunch of different places before it'll even advance. Like, she won't be in the hidden Holly Tree area unless you've talked to her at like 3 or 4 different spots, I think it is. So that one's obscure as hell. Ronnie's is obscure as hell. Trying to think who else was guilty of this. I guess my brother Corin's. His one wasn't as bad, but yeah, it's some super obscure shit that you're just gonna get lost in trying to figure out.
Definitely, yeah. It's it's that, it's a double-edged sword, that those quests, no doubt. I want to take you guys back to the beginning when you guys started playing this game, and I thought this was such a fun question from Judah S. He says, hey fellas, after 85 plus hours with this game, I can say this is the culmination of all FromSoft projects. My question for you is, what was all of your holy shit moments with this experience? Mine was going down this, is it Siofra River? Am I saying that right?
I said Siofra.
Yeah. Siofra River, and was discovering that there was a whole new underground world to explore. Appreciate all y'all, and keep rising, Tarnish. And I gotta agree with Judah here in that the first time I went into any underground section of this game that had its own map, it's like, holy shit, this is like Blackreach in Skyrim. That's the first thing I thought of.
Yes.
And then what was funny is when it fucking did it again. I was like, what the fuck? It was like I think there was actually a stream of me when I first went down there. I was like, what is going on? Like, this game is crazy. And then it just, that was probably the main holy shit moment for me. But overall, I made it a point when I was playing to not look at the full map, that I only got to see the map expand in pieces. There's actually a moment where I texted Maddie because when they start the map, it's a small square and you unlock like a little chunk of it.
Which, real fast, that is probably one of the best parts about their world design, is the map just keeps growing. Yeah, like there were at least 5 or 6 times that I was like, okay, I think I'm almost done. And I was like, and the game's like, what about map 2.0? Like, wait, what? And they're like, what about map 3 and 4.0? And you're like, oh my God, this doesn't stop. It just keeps going.
Well, that's when I texted Maddie, I was like, I think I was thinking this world was pretty big, but I was a little surprised it wasn't quite as big as I thought. And then I got another map piece, and that's the size of the square doubled.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck? This is like insane. Yeah. And so that, like, continually revealing more map pieces is such a satisfying thing. And I love the way that they did it. Like you said, Cowboy, it's like this, especially if you didn't play the network test, I feel like if you were exploring the open area, you're like, man, this is actually pretty big. This is pretty cool. And then once you unlock another piece, and then you're like, whoa. It's like this continual build up. So going back to the original question, and I'll, whoever wants to take this first, what was your main holy shit moment?
Well, you, Cowboy.
All right, so it would have to be Dragon Lord. This was like basically the day after launch, and Dragon Lord was the only trophy boss I hadn't found, and none of the review people I know had found him. There weren't any details about him on like leak areas or 4chan or anything like that. And I'm like, where the fuck is this thing? And I'm like, it's Dragon Lord, Pharaoh Missoula dragons. It's got to be here. So we're on like 3 or 4 hours just like scouring every inch of this place. And my buddies is like, we probably got to like jump into that maelstrom thing. And so we keep trying to get closer and closer to the center of the maelstrom. And then I teleport to the Pharaoh Missoula from the Belfries, which is just really far out. So it's just like a good, kind of outside view of it. And I'm looking and I see these little rocks leading down to the maelstrom. And I'm like, that's it. We got to go to those rocks. That's probably how we jump into it. And then so we teleport back and we're looking around and I finally find that path that Matty was talking about. And I work my way on down and I'm like, where you at, Dragon Lord? I know you're here. And I'm just running around. And then I see the prompt just to lie down and was instantly like, this has got to be fucking it. And you lay and then time slows and it reverses. And I was just like, oh my fucking God. Like because like there was no details about this guy anywhere. Like I might have been world first. I don't know. Because I know at Steam at the time, it was like 0% trophy achievement on that. Xbox Play, everything was 0%. And that blew me away. Because I don't think I've ever discovered a hidden boss like that, like purely on my own. And he was tucked.
Yeah, he really was.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, there are so many. That's the funny part. And I think that was definitely one of them. That's one of the best parts of the game is it just kept giving you those moments, where you're just like, why is this here? Millennia was certainly one of them. Just the holy shit moment of when she does this anime multi-slash, you're like, oh boy. Okay, it's going to be one of those fights. All right, I'm going to buckle down. I know I'm going to be here for a little bit. But really, for me, like one of my first ones, I don't know. Don't ask me how I didn't, because I played like 10 hours of this network test. I never fought Agil. And so I was exploring the swamp in Limgrave, and just all of a sudden, you hear the music kick in. I'm like, what's going on? And suddenly just dragon flies in. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? This is insane. Because it was like an evolved, again, this is why I kind of went to Skyrim with my comparisons, is it was like it was how dragon fights I imagined Skyrim should have gone, right? And they're far less buggy. So that was an awesome moment. Siofra Riverwell. For me, that was probably the best moment, because what happened was I was in the Murkwater cave with Patches. And, I pop open a chest, and it was one of the teleporter chests. It brings me to East Limgrave. It's the middle of the night now. I'm in a bush crouched, and there's these huge bears just yeah. And I'm like, oh God, like I'm definitely not ready for this right now. I got still my Confessor outfit on. I got my broadsword. I'm sitting there like a little twerp. So I'm like crawling through the bushes, like just trying not to aggravate anybody. And I find this tomb, and I'm like, well, maybe there's something in there. And much like the write-in mentions, you just hit the switch and you go down, and you keep going down. And suddenly you see like the stars, and you're like, is this a whole area? I thought I was going into a dungeon, and you're like, oh, it's it's a world down here. That was a moment where it was like, they don't have just an upper map, they have like a lower map. And you think that's the only time they do it. And then, as Cowboy said, they do it again. Or I think it was you, Dustin. They do it again and again and again. You're like, oh,
right.
It's that shocking level of depth got me.
Did you ever run into Ancient Dragon Lanisix?
Yes. The one that you can specifically spawn at night, I think it is. When the lightning storm.
Yeah, they do lightning stuff, but that was my Agil moment, because I didn't take the lift up. I took the secret. How the Volcano Manor people were like, oh, come. There's a secret place you can go to get up to the capital. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did that. And I'm just like cruising along, and like I'm fighting the first the enemy, that like big kind of chunky looking dude. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I probably don't belong here, but let me go like get a grace. And then all of a sudden, here comes Ancient Red Lightning Dragon. And like first I was like, oh God, no. It's like a haul ass. And then I'm like, hang on. I was like, I've beat dragons. I can beat this thing. I know their movesets. I know how to counter them. and I go to fight it, and this thing just goes up on its hind legs and creates a giant red glaive, and I'm like, I'm fucked. And that was it.
Yeah, that got me too.
Yeah, I was done.
So speaking of bosses, I want to. Man, time is just flying for this show, and I want to make sure we get into some of this. Maddie, you mentioned Melania. And Alex dies twice, right? So it says, hello, boys. How much trouble did you have with Melania? I had to respec my character and gear to be able to beat her after 2 days of solid tries. Some people have already mentioned her as one of the hardest FromSoft bosses, and I'm wondering if you feel the same. Cheers. And I'm glad that Alex brought up respecing your character for this fight, because I did as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I switched mine. So, okay, and maybe we can open this up to a broader conversation. And I feel like there's been a lot of conversation about the end game of Elden Ring, and is there a problem with the end game bosses being too one-shotty? No. I've been hearing that a lot. Well, that's the question though, Cowboy, is that I feel like for people that really understand builds and are really focused like builds player.
Yeah. That's like literally my channel right now.
It's like
builds. Yeah.
But there are a lot of I consider myself somewhere in the middle.
This ties back to my pre-spoiler recommendation. So when you were fighting her, what was your vigor at?
I have no idea.
Ballpark. How much health did you have?
I can't remember. I'm trying to think. I was probably level in the 80s or 90s, I think, and I probably
that's really low for Millennia. Yeah, you should have been like one. I was like 150 by the time I fought her, and I beat her biscuit, man. It was abuse.
Well, that's the thing is that so I probably was too low of level, and then I ended up I ended up coming back till I was over 100, and then I used what's the laser sword that a lot of people are calling like the broken sword that like the one attack shoots out fire and the other one shoots
flame?
Yeah. I ended up using that, and I still had a really it was a really difficult time just because I wasn't necessarily getting one-shotted every time, but I had to keep my health full out of the fear of getting one-shotted.
So a big thing is all the soft caps in this game are higher. Like just for perspective, 40 was usually your break point for most stats back in like Dark Souls 3. Vigor is a break point in Elden Ring, right around, or 40 vigor is it's like 1,500 health, but you go up to 60 vigor and you have close to 2,000. Endurance, just for stamina, goes up to 50. Strength and all of your damage stuff, strength, death, int, faith, arcane, all of those go up to 80 now, which they used to be 40 was like the soft cap you aimed for. And there's multiple breakpoints. Like for most of those, it's like 20, 55, 80. But so stat caps are much, much higher. And that's the number one thing I see is people, they're doing these fights. I mean, I was guilty of it my first time I fought Radon. I was up to like 25 vigor. And in Dark Souls 3, that's a healthy amount of vigor. You know, I would hit 25 vigor, I would get all of my other stats, and then I would get vigor maxed on up. And that was not enough vigor. Like all of my other, like the walkthrough guy, for example, where I'm at, I'm just about to start Caelid, and I'm already at 40 vigor. By the time I reach Millennia, I'll probably be at 60. And I would be surprised if I don't. I mean, to rewind, I will say she definitely is among one of the hardest bosses. We got two phases. We have Rot. Probably the scariest thing is she has her own built-in Bloodborne rally. So she's healing herself as she beats your ass. So the challenge is definitely there. But I think the number one thing is players aren't leveling vigor. Like by end game, at bare minimum, you should be 40 vigor. Ideally, you should be close to 60. Like all of my more recent builds, I don't tell people to go below 60 just because you need the health unless you want to get one shot by something.
So I actually took a photo of my stats before I restatted in case I totally fucked it up. I was level 117 when I actually beat her. So I was leveled right. But before my respec, I was at 40 vigor. So I was probably at the absolute bare minimum.
Yeah. That's like that is the bare threshold. Like I said, that's where I'm at now, and I have just finished all of Limgrave and all of Liurnia.
This is good info for me when I start I'm starting my second playthrough on Twitch tomorrow I'm doing all magic, which I've never done before in a From Software game.
Mm-hmm.
So
you want the spicy tips?
yeah, I need those spicy tips because I
I'm
have no
using
idea what I'm gonna do.
the patented cowboy blood build right now. I was like, I did
that
faith the
thing-
whole way through, and yeah, and I was
yeah,
right, because well, the whole game I'm playing faith, and I feel like I'm playing it the right way in my mind. I'm like, I know how broken bleed is. Like, I know how much damage I can wallop. Like, I need to do this my way. Like,
only thing with that build is the final boss is immune to bleed. So you get there and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
But
everything else though.
So for mages, do you know how about that like chest that'll teleport you out into Caelid near like the dragon and stuff? So if you take that chest and then just haul ass out that mine and you run southwestish, you'll find a ruin. It's like something ruins. But anyway, you get a meteorite staff there, and you get rock sling, which it's a staff that doesn't level up, but it has S scaling and intellect already. And then rock sling is a physical damage sorcery where it just summons 3 big fucking rocks and yeets them at something. Get those 2, and then get yourself a moonveil, and then that's it. You'll breeze through almost all content as a mage.
So good. Yeah.
Just moonveil and rock sling. You can bop everything you come across.
Mm-hmm. My friends are using moonveil.
Matty brought up the bleed build, and it's funny because I don't know. Maybe some people won't believe me. I wasn't looking up like what's the OP strats in Bloodborne, but I got the katana. What's it called again? It starts with a U.
Uchi katana.
The Uchi katana. Yes, I got that, and then I saw someone said online that was like, oh, if you get the Ash of War that shoots the blood out, that hurts your health a little bit, that's really, really helpful. It's like, okay, well, I'll check that out. And I was like, holy shit, the damage on this.
Yeah, bloody slash hits hard. It's a lot of stuff won't let you do it.
Right.
It hits like a truck when it goes off.
Yeah. But man, I'm excited for the mage build just because I feel like as I was mainly putting my points into strength. I feel like, man, there's so many different like spells and different things that you can do that there's just like an entire section of this game that I know nothing about.
I know,
because I didn't touch it at all.
Build, I haven't seen. This is the best build variety we've had since Dark Souls 2. Already, I've done a faith build, an arcane build, a strength build, sorcery build, dexterity build, quality build, an updated faith build, a hybrid caster that levels both faith and int, a status-based build, a spell sword build, and now I'm working on a dedicated pyromancy build. Like, there's
it's awesome.
Everything in this game is viable. It's nutty.
Yeah. As for Millennia, I remember my friends got to her before me during the review process, and they were having like a tough time with her. And I was joking the whole time. I was like, I'm going to beat her first try. Just watch. And I got her. I have a clip. When I say her health was like this on second phase, like this speck left, if she didn't have her regen from the last hit she got on my summon, it would have been over. Because I had the Godslayer Greatsword, so I was just spamming the weapon skill and just knocking her over constantly because her poise is shit. And I was like, this is going to be easy. Took me a couple hours, but I ended up getting the Blasphemous Blade. That was because I realized my Godslayer Greatsword was just too slow for her if I wasn't getting the right phase.
Think I had one or two attempts with Blasphemous. Me and the Mimic, we just juggled her ass with Blasphemous.
Yeah, once I got Blasphemous, I beat her on second try because that weapon skill is just hit the ground. Here comes a fire ray. Knocked her over. And I just did that over and over.
3.
Yeah,
my top 3.
So good.
Wave of Gold from the final boss is insane. Blasphemous is absolutely insane. And then probably Night and Flame. For PvE, at least, those would be the big 3.
Yeah. Dude, Night and Flame, that shit was fire. Like, just like melt. It's not always viable. It's always viable. It's just sometimes more difficult if the boss moves around a lot because the beam is very, like, it doesn't. Yeah. Once kind of set, it goes.
Well, and there's a sorcery spell that does that, but you can do it much longer. Like, basically, so the combination, it's called Common Azure. You get it not too late. You can get it in the volcanic region. You just got to talk to some dude. But you get that, and then you combine it with the flask that gives you no FP loss for about 10 seconds. And then you send in your Mimic to distract the boss. And once the boss is distracted, you're just like, like 10 seconds of laser, and I mean, it'll melt anything in the game.
Nice.
Like magic is definitely, I think, the strongest it's ever been. You're still an absolute glass cannon, which is a lot of people like, oh, mage is so easy mode. Like, yeah, it's easy mode until whatever you're fighting is bearing down on you and it's beating your ass in 3 swings.
I was for most of the game, because I was doing Faith, I had 2 friends doing int builds, and I was under the impression for a while, I was like, they definitely favored intelligence in this game, like with the weapons you get, but then late game the Faith
gets nutty.
Yes, exactly.
Like my ancient, I've seen Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. I've seen that do 6,000 plus damage on a boss.
Yeah. The final boss wasn't even hard because Faith gets an incantation that literally just strongly negates holy damage. So you're just fighting the Elden Beast like bah, 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 just slapping them all over the place.
Stop casting. Stop doing that. Yeah.
I wanted to bring up the Mimic and overall the spirit.
Mimic gang!
Because
I love Mimic tier.
Dude, well, this is the thing is that some people, I mean, of course, in the FromSoft community, there's going to be some people that are like, "Oh, this makes the game too easy.
Yes,
you shouldn't use it." Yeah, exactly. And so, I just was curious how you guys feel about it, whether you used it. I personally, dude, I'm all about the Mimic, the plus 10 Mimic.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, and Maddie, I wanted to ask you because I swear I heard you at some point. Maybe it was when I was editing Duke or something about how you felt that some of the game leaned too much on co-oping, and so the Mimic and the spirits were just a way to kind of fix the balance. I'm trying to remember what your take was.
You're in the right ballpark. Like what I effectively said, it was on Defining Duke. What I said was I do feel like some victories were cheapened because certain boss designs late game felt like they covered a lot of ground, they attacked quicker, and they were built to say like you should summon. And I'm and I don't think I can blame myself for this, accustomed to a specific type of FromSoft experience where like the victory feels good because you've overcome something. But sometimes, specifically, I thought for a first timer at like level, I think 80 I was at with the Radahn boss fight, like I felt a lot of victories in this game were kind of dependent on how the summon AI wanted to perform, how much they wanted to distract, because Radahn now, as someone who's in the end game, I could go and probably take him on by myself, and I think I'd feel pretty confident because I got better. But initially speaking, and especially towards the end game, I feel like some of these bosses really just coat the arena with high damage attacks and that cover a ton of ground. I'll be curious to get Cowboy's thoughts on it, because eventually it got to the point where I was like, well, I feel like the mechanics here, I'll use it, but I feel like I'm summoning for the wrong reason, where the boss's back has to be to me to get some reasonable damage in.
I mean, I think Radahn, personally, I think the intended way to fight Radahn is with the summons the game provides you, because like the game literally lets you bring like 6 or 7 in. It's the whole thing about like this, this is the battle, we're going to send him out.
It's so epic.
I mean, if anything, not summoning is the wrong way to do that fight, because you're supposed to, and I think you have to actually summon a couple of those people. I know Alexander, I think you have to summon him for his quest line. But that's the way you're supposed to do it. You're not supposed to. I mean, if anything, you're just selfish for fighting Radahn solo. All these other great warriors that wanted to join in this valiant battle to the death, and you're just stealing it for yourself. Like, wow, okay, dude, whatever. Yeah.
But by the end game, Radahn's like an example of where I felt like I had to lean on the summon AI, whereas the late game, I felt like there were fights like I think Godskin Duo. That was one where I thought these were 2 bosses that were really good, that they were trying to create an Ornstein and Smog moment that 100%. Didn't really fit. And, it was, I didn't get stuck on it, but, it was really thanks to my summon that boss fight was possible. And I felt like they wanted to have that type of throwback to Dark Souls 1 type moment there, but the mechanics couldn't support it. So it was like, oh, just summon. And if people didn't find the Mimic tier, it's like, well, tough shit.
Well, no,
that thing's a boss unto its own.
So Mimic tier, the thing I like about Mimic tier is only as strong as you as a player. It's like people that are like, oh, Mimic tier, yeah, that sucks. I tried it. It's terrible. Like, well, if it's terrible, it's probably your build, my guy.
Yeah. That shit's so good.
But even then, I mean, some of the other legendary summons are really good. Black Knife Tish, she can do crazy damage. She's hyper evasive, damage over time, health reduction on bosses, super useful. Oleg's not even a legendary, but Oleg claps cheeks. I brought Oleg into the Commander Neil fight, and I beat it on my first attempt. And people have said like, fuck this fight. I do not like this fight. He's got his bullshit knights. And I'm like, Oleg just came out like double claymores, just slapping people. Like a lot of those legendary summons are actually really, really solid. And, there's some builds where I probably use one of those over Mimic tier, like on a mage build, just
interesting.
I know my, yeah, the idea of us doing double lasers is fun, but like my mage summon is going to get clapped. I'd rather have like Ancient Dragon Knight Kristoff with his massive great shield, just keeping this thing busy for 40 seconds while I blow it up, versus hoping my Mimic Tier is going to, my Mimic Tier isn't designed to take a hit. So Mimic Tier can be OP, especially on hybridized builds. But I think it's not just Mimic Tier. I think some of the other summons are really good too. And I think it's about finding a synergy with your character where it's going to work. Like with a mage, I want a tankier summon because my Mimic is going to be just as squishy as I am. It might work out, it might not. Something that where I'm like already Unga Bunga Strength Boy, yeah, I could do the Mimic. I'm gonna have double the Unga Bunga, or I could grab like a legendary, like one of the archers or something, and just have it sit in the back so that if I'm sitting there with like for example, if you want to do like a Great Shield Strength playthrough that's all about counterplay, I wouldn't do Mimic. Because then you have your Mimic who also has a shield. Like, no, I can handle the tanking. I want something in the background that's just gonna, nuke. So I could do Black Knife, I could do Latenna, I could do Lutel, I could do any of these other summons. And I personally, I love the summoning system. Like it's
I do too. Yeah, I should have mentioned that at the start.
Especially early on, like there's so many just cool different summons to play around with. Like right now in the current playthrough, the skeletons you get from the Mariner at the very start, they are the OGs for a strength playthrough because they're cheap enough that you don't need any investment in mind, and they'll keep self-resurrecting unless they're hit after they're down, and bosses usually aren't smart enough to do that. So I'm just sitting there like smacking stuff. The skeletons will buy me like 10 seconds. I'll back off and heal. They'll go down. I'll start smacking stuff again. The skeletons come back up to start poking again. I'm like, yeah, Skelly Gang, let's go. Like,
I use the Marionette Soldier Ashes a lot. Those are my go-tos for a while because
did you ever try the Avionet ones?
Yes.
Yeah, the little spaz ones. Those things, they get bleeds super fast. That little
there are a lot of fun ones, and I'm glad that they rather than going like half measured, they went all in on it. It's just I do think some victories, for me at least, felt a little cheapened. I don't know if do you guys agree with that? Do you ever feel that way?
I mean, well, like you said, it's when it went like for Millennia, for example, I didn't have any struggle on her. I had me and my Mimic both like blasphemous play, blasphemous play, and like, yeah, in instances like that, the boss is going to get abused. But if I was playing, like I said, Mimic is only as good as your build. If you're playing a build that has super crazy spells or super crazy weapon arts, Mimic is going to, it just doubles that. So of course it's going to be really strong. At the same time, Mimics, I'm saying this as probably one of the biggest FromSoft channels out there. Mimics were put in the game by the developers. They are the intended way to play the game. If you don't, or not Mimics, but summons in general, if you don't want to play with summons, that's fine. But that is a self-imposed challenge. The notion that summons is...
Don't be a dick about it.
Yeah, the whole notion that, summons are just easy mode. Like, no, they're not. That is the intended way. FromSoft intended for you. They give you the bell literally at the start.
Yeah, they give you so many summons that they want.
If you decide not to use them, you might as well also play the game. Hey, you're such a legit player. Play it. Don't level your weapon at all, or hell, play naked with only fists. Only real FromSoft players fake.
Do you think
beat the boss naked with fist only? It wasn't a fair victory.
This was like a response to how the difficulty and accessibility conversations went. I know we've all talked about this on Ham Radio in the past, but like this is something that I know a lot of people were kind of going in on FromSoft for. And I don't know if we have a question. Sorry, Dustin, I shouldn't have left ahead, but
that's okay. Do we? Go ahead. Just go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I was just asking more. So do you think the summon system was a response to what was going on at a difficulty and accessibility front?
I think to an extent, yeah. I think that's part of what made it more accessible. Because I know FromSoft doesn't want to compromise on their difficulty. At the same time, I think this game in general lets you have a bigger power fantasy than previous FromSoft titles, whether through some of the crazy spells or weapon arts. And that too. I mean, like I don't feel... I never felt as strong in Dark Souls as I feel in Elden Ring, but I also never finished Dark Souls at 150, And I personally, I like that more. I think the power at the end of the day, I play games to have fun. I want to make characters that are super broken. Yeah, I obliterated that boss, and that's a good feeling. And the difficulty is still there. And certain builds, if you're if you don't want to use certain items because they're super strong, you can of course get some more of that, more of that standard challenge. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I liked it a lot. I think it's all good stuff.
Definitely. So, okay. So I know that Cowboy, we're running up on the amount of time that you have for the show, but there's still a lot of questions left. So I'm wondering,
Let's rapid fire them.
well, we could either rapid fire or Maddie and I could go for another 20 minutes or something, just to do some of these last ones. How about this? I got one more question that I think is great for Cowboy, and then we can do like just another quick 20 minutes. Maddie, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I'm
Calling
good for that.
variables live on the show. Let's go. So,
Yeah.
Cowboy, this question is one I really wanted to ask you. It's from Errant Rob. He says, "Greetings, maidenless men. So excited to see Fighting Cowboy join you for this, as he's my go-to for many of us Souls casuals out there. I know he helped me with my Sekiro playthrough a few years ago, like extensively. My question is simple. Most FromSoftware Souls games receive DLC. What would you like to see? A new area, new NPCs, new armor, weapons, or a Sekiro-like boss gauntlet? Thanks for the stellar content. Oh, Tarnished Ones."
I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see a DLC related to the stars.
Oh,
There's, I mean, because the current running theory is there's a lot to go. There's a lot going on with like stuff off the planet. I mean, the Elden Beast, clearly that didn't originate from the planet. If you look into the lore of certain items, you know, like Comet Azure, Founding Rain, all of those spells, they mention that like there used to be two moons. Essentially, one of the moons crashed, shattered on the planet. You know, the rain is supposed to represent like fragments of the rune coming down, founding sorceries, the gravitational stuff that Radon did. So, and then the lower cities, you know, Noxtella, Nokron, all of those areas. So there's definitely a lot of underlying themes related to cosmic or void or things beyond the world. I think we're going to see all of that in a big way in some type of DLC.
dude, that sounds so exciting. I love the idea. There's a little bit of Bloodborne in there with the cosmic nature of some of the shit going on in this game. But
once you get to the Academy of Raya Lucaria, I'm like, oh yeah, they're teasing us Bloodborne fans are pretty good now.
I will say DLC. I want to see more stuff for blood magic spell wise, and I want to see more frenzy weapons, because the only weapons frenzy has is a great shield and a spear, and the blood magic we have flies, we have blood flame blade, we have the blood toss. And then we have like the blood scratch, which is a trash can ability, and it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's not good.
So yeah, I mean, I guess you have the briars and sorcery, but like I want to be able to make a blood magic build. You know,
Right.
That'd be fun, extra edgy.
Well, Cowboy, thank you so much for joining us.
I
appreciate it.
People like waiting for me outside. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I'd stay on for the 20 minutes.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I like, it's one of those things where I'm like, it would be probably better overall. In some ways, it would be better just end it. But I'm like, there's so many questions here. I know that if people are gonna be like, you didn't touch this and this, so
Yeah.
thank you, Cowboy. We super appreciate it, guys. Obviously, check out his channel. There's so much content on there. So much good stuff.
I will hold your hand like a guiding
overall,
father through your first FromSoft experience.
That's right, a gentle touch. So overall, youtube.com/FightinCowboy, and then on Twitter as well.
Yeah,
it's an easy search. You can find. There will be a link in the description in this.
Probably already in your YouTube recommended feed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So thanks so much, man. We appreciate you.
All right. I'll catch y'all later.
Okay, so we're going to answer a few more questions just to kind of round this out, because I mean, with Cowboy, we talked about a lot of really good stuff, and it's clear that he knows his shit more than Maddie and I do by a lot when it comes to a lot of the technical aspects. But I know that, I know I wanted to cover some of these other things, just to round things out a little bit. So I wanted to get this question from Elijah Cinema. Is that Cinema? Well, that sounds like a very regal last name, Elijah Cinema. Hey guys. Hope you're having a great day. Something that really stood out to me while playing through the game was the amount of repeated bosses and enemies. While I was fine with a few of them, like the Erdtree avatars, there were others that just got annoying and lessened the experience of the first initial encounter of them. For example, the reuse of the Astel and the Tree Sentinels. Sure, FromSoft tends to show progression through reincorporating earlier bosses in the endgame, but it's never felt this lazily done. Wonder if any of you felt this way. And I think we can kind of open this up a little further in that there's reused bosses in this game, no doubt. And there are normal enemies that become bosses in this game. And there are even certain instances of enemies that were in previous FromSoftware games that show up. Not too many. One in particular, the dudes that the like lizard guys with the weird eyeballs
Oh
that are
yeah,
so fucking annoying.
yeah. That casts like curse on you or whatever, and you'll just die instantly.
Right. And then there's
Yeah.
like there's weapons that come over and stuff like that. And so there has been a conversation about recycling assets. And I want to know, Maddie, do you view this as a negative? This seems to be, and this goes in the whole industry, like as a big button topic. Should developers be reusing assets in newer games? How do you feel like it applies in this situation with this game?
Yeah, it's funny because there's a reason why. I don't know how many people listening to this actually watch my personal YouTube channel, but there's a reason why I did like my first 50 hours when the embargo lifted, and then I did like a final verdict, because in the initial go around, one thing I was very complimentary of with Elden Ring was the idea that it doesn't really follow a template. Everything feels fresh. And that was after 50 hours. After 103 hours, when I finished the game, just like Elijah wrote in, you do see some bosses pop up more and more. To call it lazily done, though, I would disagree with this sentiment, because any smart developer will reuse assets, and especially the high level of effort that FromSoft went to craft some of these bosses, they'd be stupid not to. I do think there's a mindset that less is more sometimes, and a lot of their reuses were typically in optional areas, which is why I didn't get too annoyed at it. But overall, I thought there were ones that made sense. The Erd Tree avatars made sense lore-wise. The dragons made sense lore-wise. There were enough differentiations in their attacks, whether it be elemental or patterns, that I didn't really mind. And much like Elijah said, to me, they were great progress checkers. There's the Hollig Tree area where there are a number of, one of the common enemies there that you'll bump into is the Erd Tree avatar. And he's surrounded by a bunch of knights, and there are that first boss you face. They become a common enemy, like the very first boss. And so to me, it was a good way to see like how good have I got so far in this game. And I got crushed in Hollig Tree. So it was kind of like a frustrating realization. But I think this is a point where two things. I'm not specifically speaking about Elijah when I say this, but it's a mixture of like lack of knowledge on game design, which is like developers are always going to reuse assets. Otherwise, it would just be really, really not smart of them to do so. And like, honestly, greed to some example. Like, we're treated to this by this game for so many hours of everything feeling fresh, new, like nothing really changing or feeling, or I'm sorry, everything changing and everything feeling different, that once you see the same thing again, it's this kind of shocking reality of, wait, I've seen this before. And we're so accustomed to seeing that in so many games that when a game doesn't do that for so long and suddenly it does, I think we pick on it a little bit. So for me, I think it's a fair criticism. I brought it up in my final review of the game. I do think they reuse bosses quite a bit, but not to an egregious extent personally. And when you look at things again like Millennia, Placidusax, where they're just tucked away and they're these super well-designed bosses, I'd feel silly completely running up a wall complaining about this one. So for me, at the end of the day, there is reuse, but not the end of the world.
Right. I think I'm in the same page as you, Maddie, in that I can understand the criticism, and I could, I don't know. I understand it and I don't, because at the same time I'm like, but in the end, does it really diminish from the game? Which I guess from the write-in's perspective is seeing like, I think a lot of people, the Tree Sentinel caused a lot of mental anguish, like potential mental scarring.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them, especially if you're a newcomer to a FromSoftware game and you decide that you're like, I'm going to be the Tree Sentinel right at the beginning. Then I can understand maybe seeing him repeated times would be frustrating. But in some ways, I don't know if you create a game this extensive and this big without doing that. I mean, I'm sure it's certainly possible, but I think back to one of the craziest things about this game to me is that it entered development after Dark Souls 3 is when they started working on this game. And so they made and released a Game of the Year quality game in Sekiro while working on this game in the background as well. And so I don't know. To me, when it's like, yeah, there's some repeats, but they're far enough in between and not egregious enough to bother me overall.
Yeah.
But I like I said, I can understand why it would maybe bother some people.
Yeah.
So this is kind of an off the wall question, but I wanted to bring it up because I kind of felt this way, and I've always felt this way in FromSoftware games. This one is from Jake Zielsdorf. It says, does the smithing stone system make it too costly to switch weapons and render a lot of loot unsatisfying? I thought this, and I don't know what the answer is. And maybe this is one we should have brought Cowboy in. I would have loved to hear his response to this, because at the end of the game, it is easy. Like, you can level up basically any weapon you want, and it's you have so many souls or whatever at that point that you can easily level up or buy the materials needed to level up a weapon. But I remember when I was earlier in the game, there were weapons I was like, I think I might really like this weapon, but I can't really know until I at least level it up a little bit and then mess around with it. But then I'm not going to be at full power, and then what if another weapon comes up that I like even more? And then it's like, I don't have the resources anymore. And it did feel like it stymied that creativity aspect of wanting to try out. They give you so many cool fucking weapons in this game.
Yeah.
Did you feel that way also, Matty?
Yes and no, because they have, you kind of alluded to it, but they had those smithing bell bearings that you'd find throughout the world that you could then talk to the two ladies, those undead ladies with the staves, and you could buy any smithing material that you want. My biggest issue comes in a New Game Plus, where when you load that file in, they don't carry that over. I don't get why. You have to rediscover all of them. So for those who are listening to this, you got this deep, just know, level up the weapons you want before going into New Game Plus, because they get rid of all of the bell bearings that you've acquired for smithing stones. So that was a frustrating realization for me, because I would agree otherwise that it is pretty costly, but I like that it's costly, because one thing that not enough mainstream games do, and this is our opportunity to like make it the norm, if you will, is like, it's an RPG. RPGs have pigeonholes. Like, they're hard to dig yourself out of. Again, I'll call myself out. Like, Renala. Sorry, I didn't mention this earlier because I said I was going to spoil it. Renala was the boss I got stuck on. During the review phase, I had to get Cowboy to co-op with me to get out of it, because I was so poorly built. I was doing too quality, not enough HP, and I had a weapon that was way too slow. And I did get pigeonholed by the smithing system. So everything came crashing down on me. And fortunately, the game has the systems to alleviate that, where I was like, hey, can you come in, just literally get me out of this? Because I knew respecking was right behind Renala. And so everything else I was doing all right with, but she was just giving me a hard time. And I was like, I know if I want to get further, I need to fix this. So to me, I appreciate that, but I know some people won't have the patience, the desire, or the knowledge, right? Like, I had the benefit of when I got stuck there, I was like, dude, I need the respec. I messaged Cowboy. I'm like, do you know where? He's like, yeah, you got to beat Renala. I'm like, that's the fucking boss I'm stuck on. So yeah, I do think it's a costly system. It can create some problems for you, but I think that's, in my eyes, what a good RPG does. It makes it where, like, you don't make choices to undo them. You make choices because they define you largely. And this system does that with the added bonus that you can have a currency that can later game make it a little more free and open. However, they take that away while keeping everything else when you level up. When you go to New Game Plus, like they let you keep, unless I'm missing something, they let you keep your level, your equipment, all that stuff, but you don't keep the progression in the storefront. So I don't know why they reset that. That's probably my biggest complaint with the system, because otherwise it wouldn't be a big deal to me.
Right. So, Matty, this question is mainly for me. I'm not going to lie, but I had to read it. This comes from
Berserk one,
Fink Miser. Howdy, fellow Tarnish. What do you think of all the Berserk references in Elden Ring? With Matty, how do you say this guy's name? Blythe?
Blythe. Yeah, TH.
The two D's is a...
Yeah, I think it's what was it? I read online. Finnish? Scottish? Something like that. I'm not sure.
let's see. I was trying to look it up before I read this question so I didn't sound like an idiot. And then I was like, there's no way to not. They might say it in the game, I don't remember. Anyway, we'll say his name's Blide. With Blide's armor and greatsword, I'm really enjoying my Guts playthrough. Guts is the main character from Berserk. I've been smiling my whole playthrough, all the sends up to the late Kentaro Miura. And I wanted to mention this just because, of course, the author of Berserk did just not too recently, but he did pass away. And I'm currently reading Berserk. Like, I just finished the first big volume. The second one is coming today. And I gotta say, I just gotta shout out to Berserk in that if you are a fan of FromSoftware, you really should read Berserk. You should check it out. Just because it's so clear that so much of the art direction, that's the main thing I'm gathering from being very early on in the manga. But even then, like the Guts, the main character's sword is just straight up in the game. The great sword, I believe, is it's just in the game. And they mention, he mentions this character Blide, which is the guy that has like the wolf armor on. There's a part in the trailer where it shows him when he jumps off the top, when you see him on top of that roof thing, or on top of the tower, whatever. He jumps down. They show that in the trailer, and it's like exactly a panel of Berserk of another character. It's very cool. So I want to shout that out just because I'm enjoying Berserk so much, and a lot of that is due to my fandom of this world. Matty, you've never read Berserk, or you don't know much about crossover.
I genuinely don't at all. I know the inspiration's there very clearly. Like I remember seeing comparison shots of the manga with the Erd tree, the Great Erd tree, and it's very, very apparent that there are fans of Berserk in the studio.
Yeah, there's one I saw. People just search like FromSoftware Berserk, and you'll find the comparisons. It's
if you look
cool.
at the greatsword builds with certain armor sets, you can literally make Guts. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another good one as we'll do a few more and then kind of wrap it up. The Cooter Intruder. Damn, what a name there.
Wow.
Hey, Sacred Spirit Ashes. What are your thoughts on the map and traversal system? Traversal. I can't talk anymore. Traversal system, fast traveling, torrent, grand lifts, etc. in the game. Personally, I found it quite satisfying roaming around to find items like map fragments and sites of grace throughout the world. The exceeding amount of grace sites made exploration more rewarding in each of the regions, especially knowing that you could fast travel to each location without any hassle. And finally, the addition of torrent was something I never realized was needed in a Souls game until now. Thanks, guys. Take care. And I got to emphasize here, torrent, huge surprise for me. Honestly, when I saw in the initial gameplay trailer, when they showed a FromSoftware game with a horse, I'm like, oh no.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Well, I just thought, I was like, man, so many things when FromSoftware does a first attempt or some mechanics, like particularly movement, I'm thinking of like, oh, this is what jumping was like in FromSoftware games before. And it wasn't until Sekiro they're like, oh yeah, we can do jumping and do it in a way that's not annoying. I just thought, and there's so many bad video game horses out there, or ones that are just fine. They do the job, that I didn't expect much. But now I just feel like, so I went back to Horizon, and I'm not trying to make a dig at Horizon. Horizon does what every normal video game should do. And that is you call the horse and then you go get on it. I'm like, damn, why can't this horse just appear underneath me like instantly? Like, why can't it just do that? I mean, obviously it wouldn't make sense in that world. But overall, Matty, how'd you feel about the map and moving around, the addition of torrent?
Yeah, I liked it. I thought that it was much more necessary than I originally anticipated, because with a lot of games, when I'm like, I love the open world like I did with Elden Ring. Like I think of something kind of obscure like Mafia 3, where I just love taking in that world space so much that I was jogging to some mission objectives, not all of them, instead of getting in the car, because I felt like I was breezing past too many important details that I could pick up on. Where torrent, I was afraid that was going to happen, but it never did. I just kind of stayed glued to the world the whole time through. What I really liked was the frequency of grace points, because there were certain dungeons where you could feel like when they didn't have that, how much it could really throw it back to probably Dark Souls 1 in a lot of ways. I specifically will mention I don't know if you did this one, the sewer system in Lindell.
That's one of the worst parts of the game, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Those sewers.
Yes, it's confusing. Whoever designed it was an intern for sure, because it was just completely different from the rest of the game. Like, not enough grace points, bad balancing. It was just a long stretch before you got to a grace point, and you combine that with getting lost, it feels even longer. So it was really frustrating to go through. And there are instances like that, albeit rare, where you would realize how important it is to have those grace points dotted throughout, because it made the exploration where the world could still be dangerous. Like, the frequency of the grace points were so important because a dragon could fly out of the sky and kill me, and I wouldn't have to trek a million miles to get my runes again. Like, I'd just be right nearby and go, oh, that was actually really cool. I died there. Like, their goal, there was an article with the New Yorker involving Miyazaki, and he mentioned, like, we make these games with the idea of, like, what would be a great way to die, because dying in real life sucks. So, like, of course it's really sad. How do we make that a different feeling in a game? And I think the grace points are a huge piece of that puzzle. Is like, okay, well, you died, that sucks, but you're right there. You're right there. You can go get your stuff again. You could try again. And the difficulty lies in the enemy design. So I completely agree with the sentiment that, like, zipping around the world felt great, because there was punishment in the game, but not punishment for going out of your comfort zone and seeing what was around that corner, unless you were in those sewers.
Right, man, those sewers.
It's
just like the lack of grace points, the layout was confusing as well. I didn't have a good time there at all.
Mm-hmm.
Matty, I want to wrap up with 2 more questions, and then we can call it a day on this one. This one's from our boy, Stephen Richard. He says, "What's good, everyone? Elden Ring has taken the gaming world and then some by storm. The game has people who had never touched this game, or even games in general, playing, and has kind of shaken the ground of gaming. The game is only a few weeks old, but I think it begs the question, will this game become as big as Skyrim? Maybe not just in player count, but in the sense of a generational game. A game that redefines a genre or all genres. What do you guys think? I would love to hear your thoughts on this and more. You're just about to die, but the poison from the jellyfish saves you kind of day." Damn. Mm-hmm. So this is a great question, and I think it kind of harkens back to our initial pre-spoiler conversation, just in that this game has broken through the barrier, not just of non-FromSoft fans, but the non-gaming world. In fact, I'm trying to remember, Holly. So my wife Holly, she does music and voice lessons, and she has students that are like, "Is your husband playing Elden Ring?" Like stuff like that, or like people texting people that wouldn't normally and be like, "Are you playing this game that I'm hearing about it?" Like people that don't know about games are like, "Are you checking this out?" And Skyrim, I think, is kind of a fair comparison to talk about the zeitgeist, right? Because a lot of people, obviously, Oblivion was no small game, but it was still more into the just gamers category, the niche, more focused on RPGs, whereas Skyrim kind of blew open the doors for them. So, Matty, how do you feel overall as far as this being a generational game, the comparison to Skyrim, and like he's saying, just being it's one of those stop games where it's like it feels like everyone in the industry is like, stop. This is the focus.
Yeah, you can tell because we live in an industry where like it's what's next, and we're a couple of weeks out from Elden Ring, and here we are. Number one, like for Last Stand, we typically like wait at least a month. Like we're doing it a couple of weeks after launch, but also like the industry conversation moves quickly, and the fact that Elden Ring is still a very consistent thing you see in sub boxes, on Twitter, on Instagram, so on and so forth, in advertisements, just showcases the standing power that games had. And the moment I had it is there's this account I follow on Instagram called Barstool Yule. They just post these stupid ass videos. I followed it when I was in college, and I just never unfollowed them. And I saw a comment or a post was like, it was some girl laying in bed, and she was like saying like, this guy's not getting in until he saves some elf ring, and the camera flips and he's just like mesmerized by the screen, and like all these comments from like college bros and stuff are about Rise, Tarnish, get that Elden Ring, all this stuff, and I'm just like, what is this, man? Like it's that big that this account's joking about it? That's insane. So we've all had those moments, interactions where you're like, this reaches that far. I still have yet for my dad's usually the taste test, like, because he kind of has his ear on the ground very loosely, and he'll come to me and be like, have you heard of this, son? And he has yet to come in and talk to me about Elden Ring. So to me, like, I haven't experienced it on a personal level outside of that Instagram moment where I'm like, wow, even here? But otherwise, like, I am seeing a lot of people typically outside of my social circles. Like, I have a friend who's a Warzone guy. He loves Halo, big battle royale guy, and he got Elden Ring. So, it's one of those situations where you're just seeing people you wouldn't expect picking up the game here or there. But have you experienced like that outside of like Holly students, like that level of like, you have the game, you're playing it? Because I think Chris mentioned it was yesterday on our Defining Duke Ultimate episode for Halo. He mentioned that his like accountant was saying, so are you playing Elden Ring? He's like, aren't you 50? Like, yeah. Why? How do you know about this?
So outside of Holly, really, I think Holly had a few other interactions with people that had mentioned it to her. The sad part is that I honestly, since I've been sick since like last Thursday, and it wasn't until, let's see, I went from Tuesday all the way till last night not leaving the house. So wow. my interaction with people over the last few weeks has been very low. So I haven't personally heard that. I'm surprised, Maddie, you mentioned your dad being kind of the litmus test, and I'm surprised that my dad hasn't said anything to me either, because he's done that occasionally. He'll say something weird, like, I'm trying to remember if he was like, have you heard of that Yakuza game? Or something like that. I'm like, why do you know? Why are you asking me about Yakuza? He's like, oh, someone at work, blah, 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 stuff like that. But I haven't heard anything from him yet. But I think it's exciting. I don't know. I get, I love the feeling of virality behind games. This might make people annoyed, but I even like the early Fortnite when it kind of really blew up. And I was like, whoa, what's going on with this game that it's like everyone's talking about it? And it, obviously it became something totally different that I'm not really as interested in, but stuff like that. Or Skyrim, of course, was a big one. I remember when Halo 2 came out, I was in elementary school. I was in like 5th or 6th grade. And I remember the next day there was a newspaper on a teacher's desk that had Master Chief on the newspaper, because it was like biggest video game launch of all, whatever. At the time. So I love that this happened to some extent with Elden Ring as well. You gotta wonder, Maddie, how many people picked up this game. How many used copies are there at GameStop? People that got in, hit the tree sentinel, and they were like,
yeah, not for me.
Yeah.
It's probably a lot when you think of just how many copies it sold. Like, as of this moment in time, I know it sold really well. And I remember reading a Steam Spy thing that said like 10 million copies just on Steam alone. So it's possible that this game's just in the stratosphere right now with copies sold.
Maddie, I got one final question. And Maddie, we've done many spoiler casts together. I like to look towards the future to end things off. Jambi writes in and says, howdy, boys. With Elden Ring being a massive open world and an instant success, is there a chance we'll see FromSoftware return to the old style of Souls games? Or is this just a new way going forward? I personally love more relatively condensed experiences, though this may be due to the limited time I have to game each day. Anyway, love all your work you put in, and hope you have a quote, getting a Persona spinoff, but not a mainline game on Xbox Switch kind of day.
That's a Duke listener right there.
That's very specific. And he also wrote in and said, Cowboy, love all your content. Your Sekiro walkthrough really helped me greatly getting that saucy platinum. So where does FromSoftware go from here? It sounds like, I don't know. I don't want to call it too early. There's still many games, but high probability that they are going to win many Game of the Year awards again, after Sekiro winning many as well back in, 2019?
Right.
And so where do they release a smaller title? Do they go dark for 5 years and release another open world. What do you hope to see, Matty?
I was thinking about this a lot because I don't want them to, at the end of the day, only go open world. But then I think of Bloodborne, and I'm like, well, if they made that an open world, like that's a game that, like a sequel in an open world, that was a game that really begged for it. So my initial thought was, and I want to kind of stick with that, mainly because it's interesting for discussion. Because I don't know if I'm really decided, even at this point. It's just so much to process. I feel like you could have Dark Souls. Really, Dark Souls has evolved into Elden Ring in my eyes. I don't think they go ever back to Dark Souls. I think Elden Ring is that now. So I think Elden Ring is like the open world title. Then I would be shocked if they never did a Sekiro game of some style. I mean, that game had a completely different set of systems that I would be shocked if just as developers they said like, okay, we're done with this now. Like we're not going to use any of this again. I'd be very surprised by that. So to me personally, like I'd love to see that be a more focused action adventure series that they have there, which, as you mentioned, they made in between working on Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, which is insane to think about. They're just on a whole different level as a developer. But keeping that as like the action adventure series, then maybe Bloodborne could be that typical condensed role-playing experience, and Elden Ring is the open world series. I just don't know right now, like if they were to say, okay, we're making the next Sekiro, that's open world, if I'd be crazy about that. Or if they're like, even Bloodborne, as much as I love the idea of it, I'm like, I don't know if everything needs to be open world, because this is the path Ubisoft walked, right? Like they made Far Cry 3 and people were like, this is awesome. And they're like, this is awesome? Okay, we're going to do this for everything we've got now. Where Assassin's Creed is just like Far Cry, is just like Phoenix Immortals Rise. And they just got obsessed with it. I think FromSoftware has a delicate enough creative hand to understand that shouldn't be something they do, that they keep reinventing the wheel because that's what got them to this point. But they're in a different position now. They are kind of mainstream. They are in a place where they're more flux with cash than ever before. And that does lead to kind of a crossroads. It's like, where do you go from here? I don't think they'll ever make their games more accessible, but do they look at the data and say, hey, we sold 20 million copies at the end of the road here for Elden Ring. Open world was a driving factor for that. Let's make more open world games, and trying to fit that into every vision. Like the reason Elden Ring works so well, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, to me, is they took every idea they've ever come up with across a generation and melded it into one. It felt like a magnum opus, like the end of the road in a way. And now the next step is something new, whatever that may be. I don't know, but I don't really expect them to always do open world. I feel like here it made sense. Like let's meld this avenue of Bloodborne and this part of Demon Souls and this aspect of Dark Souls and these stealth elements of Sekiro, and we'll make something that combines them all. What do you think, though? Do you think the next step is just pure open world?
I hope not. I want to see them do another open world game, no doubt. I would love to see the successor to Elden Ring, whether that's Elden Ring 2 or something different, no doubt. But I have to shout out to Sekiro, because it's now kind of, saying the black sheep isn't the right word because that sounds negative, but of their post Demon Souls fame or whatever, it is their most unique title. And it was clear that they wanted to challenge the preconceived notions of what type of games they make to their players by not making it an RPG, by not even being able to change your weapon. That it's like, this game is so focused in on the combat experience. And so that's really what I hope for next for them, is that this is, I think, the perfect opportunity for them to do something totally new now. Whether that's doing another, is it Armored Core, right? Is the mech series?
Yes.
Whether that's doing something reminiscent of that, whether maybe they do something, I don't know, sci-fi. I mean, there's so many different angles that they could go in. I loved how with Sekiro they totally changed everything, and it initially made me so mad because I was so bad at Sekiro because I was trying to play it like Bloodborne. It's just simply not possible. I want to see them force me to think about their games in a different way. And if I would love this like back and forth of like a condensed game and then like a massive game, condensed game, massive game. That would be really cool. Or maybe something totally different. Maybe it's time that they like make a game that isn't a third-person action game or something.
That'd be
All I
interesting.
know is that FromSoftware has earned it, really, at this point, to do whatever they want, and I will give them the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise.
I would almost like to see them, because what you were saying got me thinking, like create, each heartbeat of these various games we talked about, Bloodborne, its unique mechanic is where you get on the aggression to get your health back, and Sekiro is obviously the deflections and stuff, and each of these, maybe less the Sekiro deflections, but like each of these games had mechanics that bled into Elden Ring, and I'd almost like them to start the road again, like, okay, what's this new mechanic we're going to do for this game, and kind of continue that road until you get to a magnum opus moment. Maybe it doesn't take as long because you've done this before, but then meld those ideas together in another open world game. Like, that's kind of what felt right about Elden Ring. It felt like it was time. You've moved to the next level. You've made these semi-open experiences that were all interconnected for so long. This seemed like the next logical step for your games, but you also had the ideas in the tank that have been iterated upon for years, where it's like, okay, we know what to do right and wrong here, and let's put them all together. Like, if they start that process again, I'll be very excited, because then it shows that they got their money, they have the creative freedom to do what they want, and they know the process that brought them to that point. And that true understanding from top to bottom is what will keep them as one of the greatest developers of all time, for sure.
Definitely. Maybe they can use that money to figure out that frame rate and the stutter.
That'd be great.
PC.
That'd be great.
Maybe. We'll see. I'm still not even confident they're going to fix it, if I'm being honest.
I'm right there
some
with
of
you,
these
yeah.
issues. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm with you there.
I shouldn't have said that. Now I'm ending on a sour note, even though it is true.
No, it's okay.
But
it's okay.
Matty, let's wrap it up here. We ended up going for another 30 minutes instead of 20. But man, there's just so much to say. I feel like, again, like we just scratched the surface. But I'm sure across various shows we'll be talking about Elden Ring much more. So thank you everybody so much for listening. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for being on Patreon if you're listening to this at release, and to the free feed listeners afterwards at some point. We encourage you to check us out at patreon.com/laststandmedia. Of course, check out Defining Duke, Matty's show all about Xbox with our boy Lord Cognito. Check that out as well. And I think that's it. So thanks everybody. Stay well, and go find yourself a maiden.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.